Marla Henderson was hired on a Friday. By Sunday, she was already on the galactic Warlord ship, standing in front of a steel door that separated her from a child, so feared by caregivers that multiple nanny guilds had him blacklisted. She wore black cargo pants, a breathable top with reinforced seams, and her auburn hair tied back in a tight braid. The job listing hadn't mentioned names or species, just that the position was for immediate hire, child care experience preferred, hazard pay included. She had worked with difficult children before. She thought she knew what she was walking into. She didn't. Inside, the room looked more like a war simulation chamber than a nursery. The floors were embedded with shock-dampening coils. The walls were seamless metal, and toys floated freely in zero-G, pulsing with eerie light. In the center stood a boy, about 6 years old, silver skin with glowing lines like circuits tracing across his arms. He grinned when she entered. "You're the new one." "Yes," Marla said. "I'm Marla." He didn't respond. Instead, he picked up a toy cube that shimmered blue, hummed like a charge pack, and hurled it at her face. It struck her square on the temple. Pain exploded behind her eyes. She dropped to one knee, breath caught in her throat. It hadn't broken skin, but the pulse had scrambled her equilibrium. Dazed, heart pounding, she blinked stars from her vision. Then, something in her snapped. She stood up. Not slow, not shaky. She rose like a mother whose third child just dumped glue into the toaster. Marla pointed a finger. "Absolutely not." The boy froze. "You do not throw things at people's heads. You don't throw anything at anyone, ever. You sit. Now. You have exactly 10 seconds before I activate the discipline protocol." The boy blinked. "You can't activate anything. You're just a soft skin." Marla didn't break eye contact. "Try me." He hesitated. Then, slowly back toward the corner of the room and sat on the floor. Cross-legged, silent. She waited the full 6 minutes. He didn't move. When the time was up, she walked over, knelt beside him, and said, "You want to fight the world. I get it. But in here you follow the rules, or I make your days very, very boring." The boy didn't reply, but something in his posture shifted. Less defiance, more curiosity. Marla stood, turned, and walked to the wall to start picking up the scattered toys. Behind her, the hidden viewing panel dimmed. High Warlord Kriv Talak watched the playback 3 times. He had seen many things on his command ship. Battles, betrayals, the collapse of star stations and the rise of his dominion. But never had he seen his son, Vakri, sit in silence. Not after an order. Not after a threat. And certainly not after throwing something with the intent to injure. He tapped his comm panel. "Keeper." His advisors stared at him. She embraced her voice. Shmi enforced discipline. "She's a civilian. She's effective." And that was that. By midweek, Marla had restructured the entire schedule. Instead of chaos, there were set meal breaks. Instead of freeloading mayhem, she had gravity re-engaged during learning time. She introduced core cards, rotating responsibilities for small tasks like sweeping corners or organizing toy trays. At first, Vakri laughed. Then he noticed that when he followed the system, he earned points. Points got him access to advanced toys. She wasn't bribing him. She was teaching him. That effort brought reward. That actions had weight. Marla also started tracking behavior using a star chart, something she had used back on Earth. The ship's AI thought it was childish, but Kree thought it was suspicious. But by the 5th day, he checked it first thing each morning. Once, after completing a chore without being asked, he looked up at her and said, "Do I get a star?" She just smiled. "Did you do it to get one?" He frowned, then muttered, "No." She nodded. "That's why you get 2. The other staff didn't know what to make of her. Palace security kept glancing at the door, like something might explode. A few advisors tried to issue suggestions about how to control the child. Marla ignored them. She wasn't a soldier. She wasn't a servant. She was the babysitter. And she took that responsibility seriously. The first time she met Warlord Talok face to face, he looked at her like a general inspecting a weapon. "You disciplined my son," he said flatly. "Yes. You shouted at him." "I did. You used a corner as punishment." "I used it as a pause." He narrowed his eyes. "He listens to you." "Because I listened to him." The warlord didn't respond immediately. Then he asked, "What would you do if he struck you again?" Marla folded her arms. "He won't. Is strong. He's a child." Talok studied her for a long time. Then, without expression, said, "You will take over the palace nursery. All young from high command households. You will establish order." Marla blinked. That wasn't in my contract." "It is now." And just like that, Marla Henderson went from babysitter to administrator. She ran the palace nursery. By the end of her second week, the children called her Instructor Marla. By the third, the guards called her Ma'am. She didn't yell. She didn't bribe. She just pointed a finger, and every child within earshot sat down fast. Marla Henderson took command of the palace nursery like a storm front, quiet at first, but soon impossible to ignore. She didn't come in shouting. She didn't rearrange furniture with dramatic flair. She observed. She listened. She learned the rhythms of the children and the moods of the guards who dropped them off. Then, slowly and deliberately, she rewrote the rules. It started with the schedule. Where there had once been unchecked chaos and overlapping demands for attention, she imposed structure. Wake-up signals were adjusted to mimic Earth's morning tones. Meal times were coordinated with local nutrient cycles to reduce sugar spikes. Meditation pods were added after lunch to calm overstimulated minds. The children balked. At first, when the warlord's son and the undisputed ringleader grumbled loudly, called her a tyrant, then accidentally fell asleep during the first scheduled nap. When he woke, his first words were, "Don't tell anyone." Marla didn't, but she gave him a sticker that said Energy Master and said nothing else. He wore it the rest of the day. Soon, children of high-ranking officers started showing signs of change. Not submission, not obedience. One child, who had previously torn his own clothing in fits of anger, was now folding blankets for others. Another, who screamed during every meal, began asking for seconds after clearing her tray. Even the older ones, those nearing adolescence and already testing the edges of command, responded to her. She didn't coddle them. She didn't negotiate over rules. She expected responsibility and modeled it. "You're not special because your parents are powerful," she told one particularly smug boy during an argument. "You're special because you're learning how not to use that power like a weapon." He didn't respond. But he returned the next day. On time, dressed, silent. He picked up a broom without being asked. Marla gave him a nod. The palace guards took longer to warm up. At first, they treated her with amused caution. She was human, after all, fragile by their standards. Her voice didn't carry through stone. Her bones didn't regrow, her eyes showed fatigue. But she didn't complain. She didn't ask for backup when a group of bored 12-year-olds tried to override her rules. She reprogrammed the playfield herself, cutting power to their favorites for the day. When they protested, she sat them down and walked them through the consequences of their actions, without raising her voice once. By the time she was done, they apologized, publicly. The guards started watching her with interest. By the end of the week, one of them brought his own child, quietly off duty, and asked if she could do her magic. Marla just handed the kid a puzzle cube and said he'll need to earn playtime. No magic, just consistency. Word traveled fast. The palace nursery became an institution. What had once been a formality, a containment area for the inconvenient reality of powerful people's children, was now something different. Respected, feared, revered. Children still resisted. Some more than others. Marla wasn't a miracle worker, But she didn't need perfection, she needed progress. When a child kicked over a tray in anger, she handed him a mop. When another insulted her in 3 dialects, she calmly asked for a translation. When one deliberately broke a sensory toy, she made her build a new one from recycled parts. Every action, she told them, writes your story. Bakri started repeating that line when new children arrived. Sometimes he added his own twist. And if you don't like what you wrote, start a new page. One afternoon, Marla was summoned unexpectedly. Private chamber, not the warlord's usual hall. Inside she found Kriv Talak seated alone, a single glass of water in front of him. No armor, just a simple tunic. I have enemies, he said. Marla didn't sit. I assumed. They say I am too soft now. She crossed her arms. Because your child doesn't throw explosives at people anymore? Because I allow a human civilian to lecture my bloodline? Marla raised an eyebrow. Would they prefer he grows up feral? The warlord looked at her for a long time. Finally, he said, I feared fatherhood would be my undoing. She softened. It doesn't have to be. He nodded. You're doing more than controlling children. You're shaping how the next leaders think. I'm just giving them a place to be understood. No, he said. You're giving them structure, something they'll take with them long after you're gone. Marla didn't answer. But that night, she added a new section to the behavior charts, one that tracked how children supported others. Not performance, not obedience, compassion. And slowly, it became the most sought-after badge. 12 weeks into her job, Marla found herself organizing a collaborative project, a memory wall. Each child added a drawing, a word, a symbol of something they'd learned. Vakri drew a circle with dots inside it. It's me, he explained, and all the people I didn't understand before. Marla placed it at the center. She looked around the room. No plasma toys flying, no screaming, just kids, real kids. Some laughed, some sulked, one tried to dismantle a floor vent for fun. But they were growing. And for the first time, she realized she wasn't a guest in the palace anymore. She was its heart. Marla Henderson didn't keep a throne or a desk. She kept a stool near the toy shelf and a worn notebook she updated by hand every day. While the rest of the palace operated on digital records and surveillance AI, Marla's tools were stubbornly simple: lists, colored markers, and an endless supply of patience. By the 4th month, she was managing nearly 40 children daily. The nursery had expanded into an adjacent wing, formerly a weapons storage area. With permission from Kriv Talak himself, the shelves were emptied, walls reinforced with padded, sound-absorbing panels, and the floor fitted with impact-slowing polymer foam tiles. New staff arrived from across the fleet, former engineers, medics, even a retired tactician who wanted a quieter post. Each one was trained by Marla, not just in logistics, but in the deeper work. How to observe without judgment, how to hold a line without anger, how to give praise without inflating ego. Children aren't soldiers, she explained, but they do need leadership. She never yelled, but when she gave an instruction, even the new staff stood straighter. Vakri remained her unofficial assistant. No title, no special treatment, but he helped carry supplies, enforced rules with peers, and organized the cleanup rotation without being asked. He had grown taller, stronger, but also so clearly kinder. He still had his moments. The spark was still there. But now, when frustration welled up, he didn't throw. He asked to step out. Marla set up a reset corner just for him, outfitted with kinetic sand and a puzzle station. He rarely used it anymore, but it was always ready, and he always thanked her after. The warlord visited the nursery once each week, not to speak, not to inspect. He just stood silently near the observation panel. Sometimes he stayed for only a minute, other times longer. He never interrupted. But once, when a visiting dignitary commented snidely that discipline is wasted on brats, Kriv Taluk responded without raising his voice. You would not survive 5 minutes in her classroom. The dignitary never spoke of it again. It was during the 6th month that an emergency changed everything. A transport pod carrying 3 new children veered off course during re-entry to the flagship. No one was injured, but one child, age 7, suffered acute decompression sickness. Marla was there when the child arrived in the nursery med bay. The diagnosis was immediate: nitrogen bubbles in the bloodstream, not fatal, but dangerous if untreated. The child was conscious, disoriented, and panicked. His limbs shook. Breathing was erratic. Mila stepped in. She took the child's hand, grounded his fingers with hers, and said gently, I'm going to help slow things down. Let me breathe with you. She counted aloud. 5 in, 5 out. Again and again. The staff medic administered treatment, but it was Marla's voice that kept the child calm. That kept his oxygen levels stable. By the time the decompression symptoms subsided, the child had stopped shaking. Later, the medic told her, his vitals responded more to your presence than the sedative. Marla didn't respond with pride. She just wrote the child's name into her notebook, aligned it once, and added a new column, recovery support. That incident changed how the palace viewed her. Before, she had been the one who got the warlord's child to sit still. Now she was something more. Children from families of every political faction began appearing at the nursery doors. Some out of genuine interest, some out of fear that their children would fall behind. One even arrived in full ceremonial robes and asked, very formally, if the earth-blooded discipline master was accepting new pupils. Marla blinked, handed the child a sponge, and said, Start by wiping that window. He did. No complaint. Weeks passed, and then came the breach. An external sabotage team attempted to disable part of the palace's security grid. The palace went into lockdown. Marla and her staff were sealed inside the nursery with 18 children. No threat reached them, but the tension was thick. The children were scared. Marla didn't give a speech. She gathered them close, passed out drawing boards, assigned group roles, kept the younger ones near the center. Then she sat down with the rest, calm, present. When the lockdown lifted 2 hours later, the children were playing quietly. One was asleep on her lap. The security chief reviewed the logs later and said, You kept 18 potential hostages perfectly still for 2 hours with no tranquilizers and no shields. Marla just said, They're not hostages, they're my students. By the 8th month, a new directive arrived from Kriv Taluk himself. The nursery would become permanent, not just for the flagship, but for the entire fleet. Marla was offered control of the curriculum, staff training, hiring, oversight. She would be the founder of the first Interfleet Developmental Command Center. She stared at the message for a long time, then looked around the room. Children were building towers, solving math games, helping each other read, laughing. She didn't think of legacy. She just thought, I can do more. So she typed one word in reply. Yes. Marla Henderson didn't want monuments. She wanted nap schedules followed and snack times respected. She wanted children who could name their emotions without throwing a tantrum, and staff who knew the difference between a meltdown and a cry for help. So when Warlord Kriv Taluk announced the formation of the fleet-wide Child Development Corps with her name attached, she nearly declined. Call it the Nursery Initiative, she told him, and keep my name out of it. But he didn't listen. The official name became the Henderson Program. At first she cringed every time she saw it on memos. But when a technician from another ship approached her with his 3-year-old son in tow and whispered, Thank you for making this a place we can trust, she stopped caring about the title. She hadn't come to the flagship to be a hero. She came because rent on Earth was high and interstellar jobs with hazard pay were rare. But what she built, that mattered. The new nurseries rolled out slowly. Each ship that joined the program was required to follow minimum standards: dedicated child safe zones, trained staff in emotional regulation, daily structured routines, and restorative discipline practices. Marla spent her days rotating through the ships, coaching, modeling, sometimes just listening. Her nights were spent updating lesson plans, troubleshooting incident reports, and sending personal responses to staff with questions. She didn't just want to install systems, she wanted a culture. Children were no longer treated as miniature soldiers or future assets. They were treated as people, challenging people, loud, messy, unpredictable people, but people all the same. Vakri, now 8, had grown into an anchor among the children. He mentored others. He wrote his own lesson plans. He even created a morning mantra that he led each day for the younger group. Respect is our shield. Kindness is our power. Learning is how we grow. It wasn't something Marla wrote. He came up with it himself. When she asked him why those words, he said, "Because those are the things you gave me." She had to excuse herself for a few minutes after that. But blamed it on dust. No one questioned her. The day everything truly came full circle started like any other. Marla had just finished morning intake, checking off names, asking each child their emotional readiness level, green, yellow, or red, when the outer corridor lights flickered. A transmission scrolled across the wall screen. Emergency drill, full command evacuation, code gray. The staff immediately moved into action. They had trained for this. The children were ushered into the central lockdown room, supplied with comm boxes, kits filled with weighted toys, soft music pods, and breathing guides. Marla stayed near the entrance. She didn't pace. She didn't shout. She kept her voice low, her body still. Then came the unexpected, a knock. A real one, not a security override or announcement. She opened the external door to find Kriv Talek standing there, armor partially removed, a split down his forearm leaking green fluid. He looked exhausted. "Are they safe?" he asked. Marla nodded. Every single one. He glanced past her, eyes softening for the first time in a long while. "I was asked to relocate to the command bridge," he said. "They thought I should evacuate, but I needed to see them." She tilted her head. "You're the Warlord, you're allowed." "No," he said, quieter. "I'm Vakri's father. That matters more." For the first time, she reached out and took his injured hand. "Then come sit with your son." After the threat passed, just a drill triggered by a sensor anomaly. The crew dispersed. No harm, no damage. But something had shifted. Kriv Talek released a new directive that day. Every command officer in his fleet would spend 1 hour per week observing nursery sessions. Not as an inspection, as a reminder. Because, he told his council, you do not lead a future you do not understand. A year passed. The nurseries flourished. Incidents dropped. Communication improved. Parents began seeking out placements not just for convenience, but because they believed in what the program offered. Marla stayed. Not because she had to, because she wasn't done. She mentored the next wave of program leaders. She visited planetary stations to help with facility design. She even recorded a series of training modules in 6 languages. But she always returned to the flagship. That was home now. That was where her stool sat. Same spot next to the toy shelf. And every so often a new child would arrive, face hard with defiance, eyes wild with energy. They would test her. They would throw. They would shout. And eventually she would point a finger, speak in that calm, unwavering tone. And every single time the nursery would hold. Because discipline didn't mean fear. It meant showing up. It meant consistency. It meant love that didn't bend under pressure. On the day of her official retirement ceremony, something she tried and failed to stop, the children surprised her. Every one of them, past and present, held up a drawing or a note or a tiny badge shaped like her old whistle. Bakri, now taller than she was, gave a short speech. She taught us how to think, how to feel, and how to choose better. That's more than any empire has ever given me. The room stood in silence afterward. Then, slowly, everyone clapped. Marla just smiled. She kept the whistle badge, didn't need a medal. She had everything she ever wanted. A job that mattered. Children who grew. A place where peace was taught, not commanded.